So, hello everybody, and welcome to Debra and Peter Are Doing a Podcast with me, Peter Wanless, and her, Deborah Alcott-Tyler. And for those who are unaware of the backstory, Deborah and I share a birthday, the same day, the same month, the same year, and it's our birthday.
It is. Happy
when
birthday
this comes
to
out,
us.
it's our birthday.
It
Happy
is,
birthday!
Yeah.
Happy birthday
to us.
Yes. How are you feeling?
Oh, do you know, as I've got older, birthdays seem to mean less. You know, I mean, I used to like to have a big deal made of my birthday when I was younger, but now I'm not so fussed, you know, when people say, what would you like? I'm fine. You know, my partner, Andy, said, you know, would I like to go out to dinner? Listen, this is how old I've got. He said, should we go out to dinner for your birthday? Well, at the weekend, because obviously it's not easy to do tomorrow or today, which is when this is going out. And I said, no. I said, not really. I said, to be perfectly honest, you know, it costs us 30 quid in a taxi to get into town. Then we'll probably spend, you know, 80 odd quid on a meal plus some nice wine, and then 30 quid on a taxi back. So it was spent, I don't know, 120, 130 pounds for no other reason than, you know, just to go out. I said, I'd rather stay home in front of the telly and have a Papa John's. And he's like, Debs, that's not enough for your birthday. I'm like, honestly, that's what I want to do. This is how old and boring I've got, Peter. How about you?
Well, of course, just before we come on to that, you did celebrate your birthday in great style when you were 50, because you celebrated it with me. We had a joint birthday party, didn't we?
We did.
Which was the sector event of the autumn, I would say, that year.
It was. And we gave fish and chips was the food.
Yeah. That was the time when DSC had an office. And yes, it was all done there. So that was great. Now I still enjoy my birthday very much. I have all this pressure now to wear striking shirts in every situation, and so I expect that Lady W will get me a shirt or two, or a jacket, or a bright pair of shoes, or, you know. So there's always things in that kind of department that I'll be able to get. But I'm actually away from home. This is the first time, I think, in my whole life that I've ever had a birthday when I've not been with a member of my direct family. So tomorrow, on our birthday, I'm presenting a paper at a board meeting. It's not too grueling because the board meeting is in Switzerland. So I'm up the mountains in a nice hotel where no one can hear me scream. But yeah, it'll be a bit strange to be spending a birthday as a kind of work day, but without anyone really knowing it's my birthday, other than our good listeners.
It's funny, actually, because at DSC we have a rule, which is everybody gets their birthday as a day off. They have to take it on their actual birthday, or if it's on a weekend, the nearest day to their birthday. So normally nobody's in on their birthday at DSC, but I am in tomorrow because it's our Women in Leadership Conference, and I'm doing the closing keynote at the end of the day. So unusually for me, I will be at work on my birthday when, you know, so both of us, Peter, are having not normal birthdays. Yes.
Well, yeah. So what else? What else has been on your mind other than turning down every opportunity that people are giving you to enjoy yourself on your birthday?
Well, actually, party conferences, Peter. And this has become particularly interesting because a sector colleague was sharing with us. So quite a few of our sector colleagues went to the Reform conference. And this particular sector colleague was saying, you know, they'd gone, obviously, because, you know, especially their particular charity does a lot of work with local authorities, and a lot of the local authorities have, you know, are reform-led or have reform councillors. And she said she's never felt so intimidated or threatened or unable to speak what she really felt ever before in her life as she did at that conference. She said she goes to all of the conferences, so she does Conservative, Labour and Lib Dem. And she said all of those, if you have a different view, you don't feel worried about expressing it, you know, with people generally around you. And what happened is people will either say, well, we disagree and here's why, or whatever. So but you never felt that expressing a different view to, you know, the view of the party, as it were, would be an unsafe thing to do. But she said she absolutely felt that at this conference, like it was just surrounded with people who had this one absolute idea about what's right. and could not in any way, shape or form entertain that there might be a different way of looking at it. I just thought that was really interesting that, somebody, I mean, I don't go to party conferences, but that somebody would feel threatened. And she's a white woman with blonde hair. It wasn't even,
Yeah, so I've never enjoyed party conferences. I've always found them tribal. I've always felt, and I know this is a bit of a privileged position when you are associated with a household name charity that people want to need to speak to. But I've always thought if there are people who want to need to speak to me or us, we can do it out of Parliament. So why should I insert myself into someone else's party? They've all got a single worldview and they're going to talk to one another. And so I felt out of it, not personally threatened, but I have felt out of it in a way that I sometimes, when people talk about undiverse situations, that to me is one where I have felt like a fish out of water in the past. And
so
you traipse around these receptions drinking far too much horrible white wine. It's always at a time of year when there are loads of bugs around, so everyone comes back with well, it used to be flu, but now it's COVID, so the only enjoyable experiences I've had at party conference, and I tried to get out of it year after year after year, were when we took young people along, because young people love to spot the celebrity politicians, and actually politicians are interested, rightly or wrongly, superficially or deeply, in hearing from and associating with young people and having their picture taken with them. So it was just about worth it for that reason, but otherwise, I don't miss doing that at all.
Yeah, because I
certainly wouldn't give up a birthday for it.
Yeah, I've always wondered, because lots of charities go to party conferences, and this isn't a criticism of them, but I've just always wondered whether it actually makes any difference. I mean, lots of my colleagues say you get to, you have the opportunity to have your face in front of somebody, so it's easier then to follow up afterwards because they've seen you, you've seen them, you've introduced yourself, even if you haven't been able to do anything at the time. So, I suppose.
Some people love them, don't they? I mean, if you are an extrovert networker who enjoys all that sort of stuff, then why not go to 5 or 6 parties in the evening and try and speak to and engage with as many people as possible and be visible and all of that. But that, frankly, isn't me. And also, there's a bit of me that is always thinking, at least half the politicians will be thinking, what's he doing traipsing around all these ridiculous parties? Why isn't he running his charity?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
and of course, we've talked a couple of weeks ago, the meetings are the work, the networking is the work. There's definitely, a justifiable reason for being there, especially if you enjoy it and can do it well. I just didn't really enjoy it, and I don't think I did it particularly well. So
yeah, interesting, isn't it? I mean, and also they're super expensive. I mean, you've really got to, cough up a wedge of money. Either you exhibit or you host a fringe, or you have to buy a ticket, and they're not cheap, are they?
No, that has changed over time. Now, the kind of cost of having an exhibit, that you do have to think of the opportunity cost of what you're spending to be there and what you could do in other places. But then, if you've got an imaginative stand and a presence, and you can attract sufficient politicians there to get their pictures taken, and then you can get a year of publicity probably out of it one way or another. So I wouldn't sort of dismiss it, but I'd rather be in Switzerland, and I'd rather be at home, and I'd rather be going out for an £80 meal and a £30 taxi ride as well, actually.
No, you'd be much happier with a Papa John's spicy Mexican pizza in front of the telly, Peter. Yeah. Oh, but good on our colleagues who do go and who do report back and network for us. And
there's of course there are a group of people, aren't there, who run the policy and public affairs units who don't just represent the charities, but can learn and benefit and bounce off one another. So that kind of sense of being there together, and it is a moment of the year for them, and I think, again, some of them kind of enjoy that, and to deny them the possibility of meeting one another, learning from one another, meeting key people, that, I guess, that's another benefit of engaging with this sort of stuff, especially if you can do it in a way that perhaps joins up with other charities and makes the issue bigger than the individual organisation. And we were doing that a little bit at the end as children's charities, which again meant that I'd be a bit more likely to turn up or, share out the appearances with the others.
Yeah, actually, talking of that, collaborating and working together, I was also struck this week by an article, a report that 5 funders have come together to collaborate to pool an amount of money. I think it's about 15 million to fund, various parts of the country and various children's work. And I was impressed by it, because it hasn't been my experience or my observation that funders are particularly good at collaborating in that way. They'll often talk to each other, but it's very rare that they pool money and have a common end goal in that. And I was quite impressed by it. And I just wondered 2 things. Firstly, what do you think? And secondly, did you do anything like that when you were running the lottery?
Yeah, I did see the announcement. So it's £15 million to adopt a transformative approach to child poverty, which will be a struggle with £15 million.
Yes.
But you've got to admire the ambition. The more I thought about it, the more I think you are right. It is quite rare for a number of funders to come together and co-fund something. And that got a little bit lost in the announcement the first couple of times I read it, because when I read the announcement, it was talking about place-based funding, it was talking about joining up, it was talking about putting third sector organisations in the driving seat to build these kind of collaborations. And I'm thinking, well, that's exactly what the National Lottery Communities Fund has been doing through its more strategic programmes for ages. And I really enjoy and respect and have a lot of time for that way of working. It's how we were doing Better Start in Blackpool. So some of the kind of breathless enthusiasm about this is an extraordinary transformation and we've never seen anything like it before and it's going to change the face of grant making for the future. I think, well, not really. It's a number of people coming together and using a mechanism which I do think has the potential to be hugely successful if you can learn with one another and translate the learning beyond the direct investments you're making. But yeah, I can't remember when I was at the Big Lottery Fund co-funding with others. We did have award partner programs, so we handed money over to other organizations. Groundworks ran a environmental grants program for the lottery rather than the lottery doing itself, and Mind did a program of outdoor mental health and well-being projects. And then we created kind of intermediaries like Time for Change, who would cascade, beyond themselves. But funding, putting money in together and doing the grant management and all that together, that is a step forward. I mean, it will be interesting to see how the grant management works. So if you are the recipient of this money,
who do you report to?
How smooth is the accountability going to be? To what extent is not just the money being pooled, but the kind of organisation, management, accountability, all of that could be extremely messy.
Well
Hopefully
done
won't
them.
be.
Yeah, well done them for doing it. And I suspect that they will find, some flaws in what they've done and learn as they've gone along. But I hope that it doesn't, when they hit the inevitable hurdles that they will, that it doesn't put them off and they genuinely treat it as a learning for the next time they do it. And I also think it's great because it's a wonderful example for other funders, because, when I go to talk to funders at conferences, which we get asked to do fairly frequently, one of the messages I always push is, why don't you collaborate more? Most of you are funding similar work in similar areas you're funding a mental health charity and you're funding a homeless charity, and there's a link between homelessness and mental health. So it makes sense, doesn't it, to come together and really think through exactly as you said. They've used the word transformative, which is easily said, but big picture thinking, especially regional funders. I think there's such a place for regional funders to come together and say, look, what does it look like in, North Yorkshire? What does it look like down in Cornwall? And so how can we combine our funds and collaborate together so that we actually get, it's a more connected outcome? And then the other thing I'm always banging on at them about is about voice. I've always said that funders have so much power because nobody thinks they're asking for money. So whereas we as a sector, whenever we speak to the local authority or to the, our MP or, the government department, usually we're seen through this suspicious lens of, and actually when is the ask for money going to come?
Yeah.
Which isn't an unfair interpretation, because often we are going with an ask for money, but funders aren't. And when you have that amount of power and wealth, there's a very good chance that you are going to get the meeting that your average charity in that area wouldn't get with the councillor or the senior civil servant or whatever it happens to be. So, I'd love to see funders doing more. I mean, I spoke about this. There was an ACF event a couple of weeks ago now, where I was on a panel, and this cropped up. This thing about voice. And there was a couple of the funders in the room said, the only thing they're worried about is that will they get co-opted by the local authority or by the government to give money, to subsidise, the government basically. But then we talked about the fact, well, you may choose to, or you may say, no, we don't want to. What we do want to do is just be heard. And, that's a way of doing it. So I'm hoping to see more. I know Association of Charitable Foundations has specifically a thing called the Collaboration Hub, where they're working very hard to try and encourage trusts and foundations to come together more and have more of a voice and, be more collaborative across those different things.
Yeah, the way in which some of the lottery strategic programs have worked has been to encourage require statutory services around the issue to bend their activities and make their decisions in a way that would be different from what they would do if they're working by themselves. So that's a way of trying to use your money to influence beyond without giving your money. And you need the governance and control, don't you, to sit with the outcome or the objective that, as a funder, that you're seeking to deliver.
Actually, that is such a good point, Peter. That's such a good point, because you're right. If you as a funder are prepared to co-fund something with the local authority, whatever that thing might happen to be, some project or some piece of work for the community, you have the ability to influence how they spend. And not only that, because I remember there was a collaboration between the RNIB, blind colleges, NHS, a number of institutions that don't typically work together terribly well and actually, they rub up against each other a bit. And they launched this new thing called Vision Pathway, where I was asked to give the keynote at. And what was really interesting about it was that one of the key messages that came out of that was that because the RNIP is an independent charity, it was able to move much more swiftly and much more quickly than the local authority, the NHS, etc. were. But because of the swiftness of their movement, if you know what I mean, it meant that the others also moved slightly more swiftly to keep up, but it also meant that things that the local authority or the NHS couldn't do because of the rules, the RNIB could do, and it was still within the partnership. So there is something definitely to be said about working alongside and co-funding or co-delivering activities with the state.
One of the difficulties, if you want to create an investment, a funding program that is going to be transformational, is going to build the relationship sufficiently strong to last through a period, is that the statutory services have such short time horizons. So even if you have a spending review announcement, there always seem to be funding rounds or kind of cuts or whatever. So the commitment beyond the current financial year for the statutory service is really challenging. And that really would be a transformative thing if there were a way of committing, whether the contracts are let by the local authorities themselves or the commitment of the statutory services into one of these funding programs was able to stretch beyond a year, 18 months. That makes a difference. So certainly in the Better Start in Blackpool, it was the commitment for 2, 3, 5, 7, 9 years that gave the breathing space to have the collective conversations that would last the test of time. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think they said there's going to be 10 areas and they're going to start with 5. And one of the interesting things they're going to have to think about is, are we going to go to the places where the need is greatest and the fragmentation is at its most appalling? Or are they going to look for the places where you've got a reasonable maturity of partnership already developing? And
what would you do?
Be I just think you need to be deliberative about it. If you're going to go to the places where the need is greatest and the partnerships are non-existent, you really have to be there for the long haul. In the Together for Childhood program, which the NSPCC ran, and in the Better Start programs which the lottery ran, there was a deliberate attempt to try and seek out places where people already had a sense of kind of kindred spirit and common purpose. So there was something palpable to build on.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's that going to the hardest places is the hardest thing to do, but it's probably the most important thing to do, because if you can sort that out, if you can change the system, if you can create support mechanisms and networks that lift people out of whatever the challenging circumstances they're in, that filters up, doesn't it?
But it's about the relationships and not another few £100,000 to add into all the other money that's already going into these places on needs-based formulas of one kind or another.
It's not just about money. That's the point, isn't it? You're absolutely right, because money doesn't create change. Money creates the possibility for change to be brought into being, doesn't it? So I think you're right about that.
The thing that individual funders can do, whether or not they join up with one another, is create funding programs that have outcomes that it's impossible for single interest, single issue organizations to deliver for themselves. So there was quite a lot of that went on before my time at Big Lottery Fund and subsequently, where we would have huge conversations with ourselves and one another about, can you force collaboration? And
the answer is no.
Well, I don't know. I can sort of argue this both ways, because what was it someone said? I think my predecessor, Stephen Dunmore, he had this great phrase about the definition of collaboration is the mutual suppression of what's the word? It's not hatred, that's too strong, but the mutual suppression of hate, the mutual suppression of dislike in pursuit of money. And there were, it's too long ago now for me to remember, but there were organizations which we had engaging with one another, making things happen, who wouldn't have sat in the same room with one another, but by pursuing a grant that was available for 5 years, you could get them together to do something. So these kind of shotgun marriages, they can work. I mean,
I suppose
probably they fall apart at the end of the grant, unless you are demonstrably investing in the mitigation of dislike stroke hatred, as well as the direct outcomes you're seeking to deliver.
Well, part of the problem is that, you might work collaboratively for one particular fund, but it's unlikely that you as an individual charity are relying on that one fund. So you're applying to other places, as are those people you're supposed to be collaborating with. So the competition hasn't been taken away. That's the problem. So you can cooperate for that one fund, but you're fighting viciously behind each other's backs and stabbing each other in the back.
Maybe you
because
are.
Because you're applying for this particular pot of money from the local authority from a different funder that your colleagues.
But if through the habits and practices of working with one another, you get to understand one another better and you build some respect. I mean, I don't know. There's many examples of it not working, and there are a few examples of it working. But I think it's a reasonable objective for a funder to have a go at, and not simply say, you know.
I think what often happens, though, is that there's no support given to the collaboration. And what I mean by that is that they're given money and they're told to crack on with it. But actually, you very often need facilitators, coaches, enablers, sometimes mediators. You know, funders have got a much better chance of those collaborations working and lasting if they also provide, here is your person who is going to help you to facilitate, to manage the conversations, to learn how to speak to each other nicely, but also locally based stuff. I mean, this is one of the things I love about the lottery was I was at North Surrey, Voluntary Support North Surrey, doing keynote week last week, a couple of weeks ago, I can't remember now, and a whole load of charities in the room. But one of the other speakers was one of the grants officers for that area from the lottery. And I'm getting old, so I'm ashamed to say her name's gone right out of my head because she was so impressive. She was a really brilliant young woman who really knew the people in the room, was connected to them, understood what the issues were, you know, spent most of her time like learning about, you know, who likes who and who gets on with who and where are the, and you can't actually put a price on that. I mean, I think every penny the lottery spends on those people who are out there actually in the communities, living there, listening, talking, giving advice, because of course a lot of what they do, as you know, but listeners may not, is a lot of what they do is they give you a lot of advice about how to apply for a program and how to improve your chances of success. So even though they don't make the decisions, you might still not get it. What they do is they guide you through the process. And I just think that's, I hope the lottery never stops that practice. And I really, I suppose they probably don't, but I would love it if they would share that with other big funders. I mean, lots of funders simply aren't resourced enough to do that. I mean, there are some quite substantial ones who could.
Some of the community foundations are really good at this, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
They know their areas and
really well. Yeah, that's very true. But actually, it also makes me think: is there any reason at all why part of funder collaboration couldn't be the lottery sharing their grants officer with other funders? You know, so funders who can't afford to have a local person in the area, you know, perhaps the lottery might say, well, we've got, you know, Saskia in Blackpool. You know, have a chat with her about what's going on or something.
I don't know how many they have got now, because there was this great debate to drive down the. I mean, every grant officer is a overhead on the money that isn't otherwise distributed to charities. So you have this argument that goes round and round about what is it reasonable to have in the kind of infrastructure of the funder, and what should you be distributing, and certainly there are far fewer of those sorts of people now than there used to be.
But they're so valuable.
Yeah.
And they're valuable for everybody. They're valuable for local authorities. They're valuable for the infrastructure bodies working in that area, you know, to call on those people. So
MPs really love them as well. The same MPs that absolutely hated the idea of any sort of overhead being spent by the lottery at all were the very same MPs that love to get these sorts of people along to discuss with their local groups how to get as much money out of the lottery as possible. It's ironic, really.
Well, it's one of the things I've had to explain actually to people is like, you know, the fact that one of the reasons why lots of funders are not able to deal with applications quickly, are not able to respond in the ways in which people want, is because boards of funders are typically reluctant to spend money on the infrastructure of their trust or foundation, because they want the money to go to the beneficiaries or recipients. You know, where so for me, I always say I think it's worth investing in a good infrastructure if you're a funder, particularly if you're a big funder, because you will do a better job of funding. You'll be quicker, you'll be more responsive, you'll be better informed. So I think it's a false economy. But I do understand why funders do it, because there's this huge guilt of, you know, we shouldn't be using this money for ourselves. But I would say to them, funders, get over yourselves about that. If you resource yourselves well, you'll have better applications, you'll give better grants, you'll have better reporting, you'll generally be a better funder if you spend a little bit of money on the folk. Yeah, although it'll all be AI soon, won't it? Anyway.
Well, I was just about to say a lot of this stuff will be able to be automized, but but that will then leave both the quality of the relationships and the reach of the relationships, especially the kind of reach out to the issues and the individuals. I was going to say organizations, but usually they will be kind of individuals or one or two people that really know and understand about things that need to be done, that aren't going to be in some great big database that an AI system is yet going to be able to suck up. So I think there's space for this sort of human insight and interaction for a while.
So, yeah. Well, because the thing is, AI, no matter how good it is, it's not necessarily going to ever be able to interpret, so Peter Wanless says things with a lovely smile on his face, but we know from bitter experience that he turns around and does something completely different. AI is never going to know that or see that or be able to, he charms the pants off you.
If it's got enough.
He charms the pants off you, and then before you know where you are, you're searching for your wallet, But that's the sort of human instinct and intuitiveness and emotional engagement, I think, that humans have, and also about really properly understanding about how to get people to get on. When I was giving a speech ages ago at a large military charity at their sort of AGM, and at the end, one of the questions was, we have this mismatch between our volunteers and our staff, and it is a bit of a problem. What's your advice, Deborah, on how we can bring them together and break down the barriers? And my advice was alcohol, obviously. And of course, that. But what the thing was, me saying that in that moment, the whole room erupted in laughter, and they then had something in common to laugh about.
Right.
Just see what I mean? Whereas I couldn't imagine that AI would ever be able to pick up the feeling in the room and do those responsive sort of one-liners that changes the mood of the conversation. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, or they might have a go and get it disastrously wrong, and then it's too late. You've lost.
And then it's worse. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you've lost the moment.
But I'm not anti-AI. I mean, I think that I'm a big fan and using it more and more and more for stuff. But it has its issues. It doesn't tell the truth. It tells walloping great lies.
I thought it was interesting on last week's that I do listen to the odd podcast by other people from time to time, and George Osborne and Ed Balls do a podcast called Political Currency, which I do think is good, but they read out on there Ed Balls read out a Shakespearean sonnet to George Osborne, which he commissioned in the moment. And I think, come on, this podcast was there. I was writing you poems 9 months ago. Get with the program. These two guys may have been running finance ministries or whatever in the past, but we have got our finger on the pulse of AI. We are months ahead.
Although we had a leadership team meeting today, and we're talking about various actions we need to take in order to get us through the next few months. And one of the things is to do with uploading our courses onto our website. So I volunteered my help, and there was like a deathly silence and then snorted laughter. So it was really clear from the expressions on their faces that there's not a cat in hell's chance they're going to let me anywhere near anything that's technological, because I'm absolutely bound to do something wrong. It was so funny. But I offered to help. I'm keen and I'm willing. And they're thanks. You could just support us from the sidelines, boss. Just say well done.
It must be something to do with our star sign and common birth date, this impracticality when it comes to these things, because we're going to have to end this call, because being in Switzerland, I had no idea that the plug one requires is a class J plug and not a class C or F plug, which seems to work in every other bit of Europe. But there we are. That's the EU and non-EU associate member. That wasn't an issue in the Brexit referendum. How many plug sockets should we have? And even while we were in the EU, we managed to keep our own kind of UK plug, didn't we? But I thought I knew how to plug something in across Europe, but it seems not. And so while my USB cable will work for my phone, my laptop is about to run out, and so therefore we must finish.
All right.
So
well,
happy birthday,
happy birthday, Twinny. Enjoy it when you finally get home, and I hope they spoil you to pieces.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Happy birthday.
Bye,
see you.
all.
Bye.